And so Jesus, being troubled in spirit, and testifies in verse 21, says, Verily, verily, right, listen closely, I say unto you that one of you shall betray me. So he says, one of you disciples will betray me. At this point, you can imagine the disciples are probably like, wait, what? And they're going to listen very closely because they're like, oh, is it me? Right? They're going to be scared. So then in verse 22, then the disciples looked one on another, doubting of whom he spake. So they're like, who is it, right? They want to know. And they're like, is it me? Is it him, right? Then in verse 23, now there was leaning on Jesus' bosom one of his disciples whom Jesus loved. And so it's actually really funny here because this is actually John, because John's referring to himself as the one Jesus loved. And you can read that very clearly when you pick pieces together, because obviously the 4 different gospels are from different perspectives. And when you put things together and match up stories, when it says the one Jesus loved, it's always referring to John, and he refers to himself in the third person. It's kind of funny, right? But he doesn't directly say that it is him, almost like he's trying to keep himself synonymous here. Then he says in verse 24, Simon Peter therefore beckoned to him that he should ask who it should be of whom Jesus spake. So he says, hey, John, ask Jesus who it is, right? And then in verse 25, he then lying on Jesus' breast saith unto him, Lord, who is it, right? And so he's telling him, like, Simon Peter's like, well, we know Jesus loves him a lot, right? And so if you ask, like, he'll probably say yes to you. He'll probably tell you, right? So then in verse 26, Jesus answers unto him after John asks him, who is it that is going to betray you? Jesus says, he it is to whom I shall give a sop when I have dipped it. So he takes a sop, which almost is like kind of like a sponge, right? He dips it into water, and he says, whoever I give this to, that is the one who will betray me. So then immediately he dipped the sop and he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. And then verse 27, and after the sop, Satan entered into him once again, right? And now this was like the action